and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And today, we will be embarking on our journey to the center of the Discworld with possibly my favorite Discworld novel, The Hogfather. But before then, Sarah, what's something great that happened recently? I think I might know your answer.
I think you do know my answer. My something great is Antarctica.
Just the whole thing, the whole continent?
The whole continent. Specifically the fact that I went to Antarctica and it was an incredible trip. I won't bore everyone by talking about it too much, but it was fantastic.
Well, I'm glad you had a great time, and I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. I'm glad I had a great time, and I'm slightly less glad I'm back. But it's good to be back recording Fiction Fans. So
we could find a way to make it work if you want to record from Antarctica.
I don't know. The cost of Wi-Fi from the cruise ship was pretty egregious. I like recording Fiction Fans, but I'm not sure that I like recording Fiction Fans that much.
Well, all right.
What's your good thing?
It's vacation time for me now.
That is a very good thing.
I'm going to have a whole 8 days where I'm only checking my email a couple times a day instead of working all day. I'm probably still going to work for half of tomorrow, but
as long as it's only tomorrow and not the rest of the time,
we'll see what happens. I will be spending that vacation time traveling, which is slightly less restful than wrapping myself up in a blanket burrito with my cats, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, you'll get to see me.
Yeah, I get to see you all the time, though.
You'll get to see me in person.
That's true. Well, as we count down the minutes until I find myself imposing on your hospitality once again, Sarah, what are you drinking this evening?
I feel like I should be drinking sherry because there's an awful lot of talk about drinking sherry in Hogfather, but I don't own any sherry. So I am drinking a small dram of whiskey instead.
Well, that still sounds lovely, though.
I clarify small because I drank an awful lot of everything when I was traveling.
Were you visited by the O God of hangovers?
I was visited by the O God of hangovers, or rather I wasn't, because I was the one who had the hangover.
Yes. Well, I am drinking the dregs of several types of wine Daniel and I bottled this year's vintage a couple days ago. And there's always like a little bit left at the bottom that you don't want to actually put in a bottle because it has all of the like grape crud left over in it. So instead, I'm drinking that.
I mean, you can't let it go to waste.
No, so there's a little bit left from like each batch, and each one is like slightly different, but we mixed the extra parts all together in a pitcher, so we're calling it Frankenwine.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm recycling. That's not quite what it is, but you can tell it's thick.
I can see the sediment. Yeah.
Yeah. When there's that much, I don't know if it's sediment anymore. It's just sludge.
Sediment sounds a little nicer when you're drinking it.
Or chewing it, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Well, have you read anything lately?
I did actually do a lot of reading. Not as much as I thought I would, because we had 2 days on the Drake Passage going to Antarctica and then coming back, which were just sea days. And I thought I would be spending the entire time reading, but they actually had a lot of lectures. So I didn't do as much reading as I thought I would, but I did do some reading. And one of the books that I read was Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne, which is cozy fantasy, kind of along the lines of Legends and Lattes. I mean, I guess it's along the lines of Legends and Lattes in that it's sapphic and cozy and fantasy. And there the similarities kind of end. But I guess that's enough.
Those are some solid main keywords.
They are some solid comparisons, yeah. It was a delightful book. It features an established couple who's super cute. Like, I loved the relationship. They run off, abscond together to open a combination book and tea shop. They have some difficulties because it wouldn't be a book if there weren't some kind of hurdle to overcome. And there's a happy ending because it's cozy.
Wonderful.
And coincidentally, I had an ebook, but I found a physical copy in the Atlanta airport on my way home.
Oh, how nice.
Which was a nice little coincidence, yeah.
I should not admit this because I did procrastinate very hard on podcast reading for this week, but I did also reread some Hobbit fan fiction that is very good. It's called The Mushroom Mine, or maybe that's the name of the. There's a couple of stories in that series, yeah, but it's where the dwarves discover a cave full of mushrooms that are very, very valuable to hobbits, and so Bilbo takes over the management of it and obviously finds love along the way because
of course.
What else are you gonna do?
So it sounds like you too were reading cozy fantasy.
Yes, except I don't know if I would call romance cozy because there's lots of relationship drama going on back and forth.
No, I don't think that romance is like inherently cozy. Just the way that you described that story sounded like cozy fantasy.
Oh, there's some relationship angst going on. Don't worry. I was just not going to get into it.
Okay.
That's not what this episode is about.
I mean, I feel like you can have angst in a cozy fantasy story, but I think it's the level of angst to the rest of the story, like the proportion.
Yeah. No, I would not call this cozy. I know how it ends because I've read it before. So I was not like stressed out, but
that is a slightly different vibe though.
Yeah. All right, but we did actually read a book for today, a very seasonally appropriate book because it is in fact just about winter solstice. We are around that Christmas time. It's a little bit New Year's-y right now, and all of these things rolled up together is the Discworld holiday of Hogswatch. It just so happens that this episode was recorded quite a while ago and is now being released several weeks later.
Yes, it is very seasonally appropriate to be reading Hogfather.
It's probably the book that I reread the most out of Discworld, just because it has so many elements that I love, and also I fucking love Christmas. So it works. I actually probably watch the adaptation more often than I read the book, but it's a damn solid adaptation, I gotta say.
It is a good adaptation. I definitely read the book more than I watch the adaptation, but it is a good movie.
I think one thing that struck me rereading it this time was how quickly the movie goes. Like,
I mean, a movie kind of has to be pretty fast paced because there's a lot to jam into 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever.
Yeah. To be fair, I think it's like 4 hours long. But
is the movie really that long?
It's 2 episodes. It's 2 long ass episodes. Yeah.
I forgot that it was kind of I don't want to call it a mini series because 2 episodes does not a mini series make, but
no, it's a long ass movie with an intermission.
Yes.
It hits basically every plot point very accurately to the book. Like, I don't think it changes anything, but we do lose out on some of the like banter and charm. Well, obviously, because you don't have the narration. There's a little bit of narrator, but just for like the introduction. There's not like a constant narrator over the movie. That would be ridiculous.
It's hard to do footnotes in a movie too.
True. But the movie is more atmospheric, I would say. Like, the book is just like general pleasant Pratchet nonsense for the most part. And there are emotional moments, sure, but the movie feels much more Christmassy overall, I think, just because there's constantly like Christmas music playing in the background and, well, Hogswatch music, but it's the vibe, there's like little bells going. That's Christmas.
I mean, I don't know. I felt like the book was quite atmospheric, given all of the scenes like involving snow.
I guess. Snow is not anti-Christmas, but I do not associate snow with Christmas.
You live in a place where it snows a lot more frequently than I do.
Oh, I was going to say it's because I grew up in a place that it never snowed on Christmas, so why would those things be related at all?
Well, no, see, that's why, because it doesn't snow where I live and where I grew up either, but that's why I associate it with Christmas, because it is like, that's the the imagery that you get in every like Hallmark Christmas movie. It's snowing. Thus, snow equates to holidays, to Christmas in my head.
I mean, you're not alone. I know that's a thing. And I think it just makes me cold. Not very jolly or other things ending in Ollie.
Very nice reference.
Yes. I'm just going to make lots of oblique references to the book we read, and hopefully our listeners have read the book. If not,
sorry in advance.
Yeah. So, if I may get on a soapbox for a moment.
Are you ever not on a soapbox?
Yeah, usually I'm on a podcast. There's a question that people ask when you talk about a book, and they say, "Oh, what's it about?" And that, to me, I feel like is not what they're actually asking. Because what happens in this book is the Grim Reaper has to substitute in for Santa Claus to prevent Christmas from not happening. But I would say that the book is about the power of belief and the concept of existence. Which is I mean, both of those sentences are true, and either of them could answer that question, but...
So I don't get what your argument is. Are you saying that when people ask what a book is about, what they're really asking is what happens in a book?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes the answer is... No, what am I trying to say?
Those answers are sometimes the same, but not in this case.
Yes, those answers are sometimes the same, but not always. I am going to blame jet lag. I'm still a little bit jet lagged. I only got home a couple days ago.
I got where you were going with that.
Yes.
I mean, like, the idea of replacement Santa Claus is not new by any stretch of the imagination. Even having a skeleton replace Santa Claus is not particularly unique. I did look it up. The Nightmare Before Christmas came out in 1993. The Santa Claus, that movie with Tim Allen, where Tim Allen becomes Santa, came out in 1994. And it looked
where
like
Tim Allen kills Santa.
Yes, and then must become that which he murdered. And other happy Christmas things. And it looks like the first publication date of the Hogfather was in 1997. I am not arguing that the Hogfather is derivative of either of those two works. But I was just very curious as to the order of operations of these things. And I'm sure there are other Santa replacement stories, but I cannot think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah, I feel like you covered the main ones, or the well-known ones. It is interesting to see what order, or the order in which things appeared.
Really, I was going to maybe put on a tinfoil hat, get off my soapbox and put on a tinfoil hat and say, maybe Tim Burton read this book. But no, it came out first. I was kind of surprised.
Tim Burton read the first draft.
Yeah, they were buddies. I mean, you have to admit, Skelly Santa is such a strange thing to be so common, or to happen twice.
I guess. I mean, isn't a horse skeleton, not that is the same thing as a person skeleton at all, but there's some kind of Welsh Christmas holiday celebration involving horse skulls and possibly skeletons.
Oh, if there is, I'm not familiar with it. I guess when you think about winter solstice as a concept, it is everything is dead and frozen. Please, spring come someday. So I guess associating death with winter solstice is not revolutionary.
Yeah, and also it looks like it is the horse skull is a wassailing folk custom found in South Wales.
Well, all right. But does he take the place of Santa Claus? No, because Santa didn't exist.
Performed during winter festivities, specifically around the dates of Christmas and New Year's, but I don't think it's specifically a Santa replacement.
Yeah. Really, I think it's funny, right? You have this very pop culture-y, I mean, because Santa Claus is pop culture, right? I've seen nothing religious about that guy. just like forced cheer of this holiday. And so bringing in something macabre like a skeleton is just a fun contrast. But everyone knows Death is actually the biggest sweetheart in the world, so that shouldn't surprise anybody that he would be Santa Claus, or the Hogfather in this case.
And I don't want to say he makes a good Hogfather, because I don't necessarily think that he does, but he certainly makes an endearing Hogfather.
Well, he's better at it than Jack Skellington was, that's for fucking sure.
I have seen The Nightmare Before Christmas, but not recently at all, so I could not make the comparison.
He's so bad at it, people shoot him.
Oh. Yeah, okay. I do think Death is a little better at it than that.
And Death really, I mean, it takes a while for him to get the hang of it, but he really wants to learn the traditions and spread cheer and everything. It's not exactly easy for him, but he wants to.
He wants to do a good job, for sure. That's why I say he's an endearing Santa. He's doing his best, gosh darn it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not always doing a good job, but he is doing his best.
One of my favorite things about this book is the idea of how children are vicious little monsters. Or that's an exaggeration. There are several times in this book where Pratchett mentions that adults think kids hate scary things, but of course that's not true. Kids love scary things or violent things or crude things or whatever. And just that sort of difference between the nature of children and how caretakers around them have sort of created this false angelic image of them. It's good and funny.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about, not in so many terms, but he talks about how, like, the further the caretaker gets from childhood, like the more cotton candy it was,
Mm-hmm.
and the more like insulated they feel that kids need to be from the realities of the world, when really that's not necessarily true at all.
Plus we get the frail, not imitation, artificiality, is that a word? Artificialness? I don't like either of those. Well, he points out how artificial gender norms are, right? Because when Death is asking little kids what they want for Christmas, parents will butt in and say what they want their kid to want. And it's always like a dollhouse or something stupid. Not something stupid, that's not fair.
Something gender typical.
Yeah, and it goes, it's not just a dollhouse, right? It's, she wants to just like mommy cleaning supplies kit and like a tiny stove, like it goes overboard with the we're training up a tiny housewife thing. But when Death forces the parents to butt out, the little girls are like, I want a sword. Or at least the one in particular that we see. And so that's fun. It's like they're tiny people or something.
What a concept.
I know. So we also get Susan back in this book, who I don't think anyone will be surprised to know I love dearly with all my heart.
I like Susan a lot more in this book than I do in Soul Music.
Yeah, well, she's gotten past the disbelief and is now still trying to be normal and trying to avoid her grandfather's hijinks.
Which I think is a lot more relatable than her. I am just going to ignore everything in my face.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I quite like Susan in Hogfather. And her, yes, she has these moments where she just wants to be normal, but she's also very practical, which I enjoy reading.
Mm-hmm. She makes good decisions, which is always really nice in a main character. Not mad at her all the time.
Yes, I do enjoy not being mad at a character, to contrast with Violet, who is the other female character that we see. Well, one of the other female characters that we see, who frustrates me to death.
I mean, she's kind of supposed to, though, isn't she?
Probably, but that doesn't make it more tolerable in her case.
Okay. I do think it does sometimes. If you're like, the author knows how annoying this is.
I agree that sometimes it does, but I think at this point in Discworld, Pratchett has enough of a history writing female characters poorly that, not that I think she is doing anything other than what he intended her to do in the text, but I don't have as much belief in like that as I would if all of his other female characters in his previous books had been great.
You don't fully trust that it's on purpose. I get
Yeah.
that. Yeah. At least she's not in it. I mean, she comes in pretty late.
Yeah, I mean, she's only in like the last quarter of the book or whatever.
Yeah. She is a tooth fairy, though. I love the idea of the like
franchise tooth fairy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a job like waiting tables or something. Oh my gosh.
Except not even as well paid, because Violet makes a comment at one point that she'd be making, or Susan comments that Violet had said that she'd be making more money if she was waiting tables.
Just making something as fantastical as the Tooth Fairy so mundane is just delightful.
And very in keeping with Discworld. I mean, like that's what he does with everything, really. Like that's the whole premise of Discworld.
Yes, that's true. This book has some wonderful callbacks to things that we've seen in earlier Discworld novels.
It does. I really enjoyed, I mean, these are very small references, and they're specifically references to earlier Death books. I think the ones that I picked up on in particular were for Reaper Man, but like they talk about Windlepoon's ear trumpet and, you know, that time that the wizards had to deal with excess life energy. And it just made me smile.
Yeah, it solidifies that these books are all happening in the same world in a way that you don't really get that often. They tend to feel pretty self-contained.
Yeah, it makes them feel part of a series, but not in a way that is exclusionary to someone who hasn't read the books, because this is a series where notoriously you can come in pretty much at almost any point. And so it's nice. There are these little winks to the reader who has read the earlier books, like, hey, you remember this, right? But it's not such a big thing that if you miss it, you feel like you're missing out.
Yeah. This was the first Death book I read.
Was it?
Yeah.
But not the first Discworld book.
No, it was early. It was definitely one of the first ones, but not the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a picture of Santa Claus with tusks on the cover. Of course I picked it up.
Of course you did.
There's a lot of overlap in the aboutness of this book with Small Gods.
Yeah.
Right? You have the idea that belief has actual power, and the more people that believe in something, the more power it has. But I think I like the Hogfather better because it comes at it from like a folktale perspective instead of an organized religion perspective. And that's just more enjoyable to me from a story perspective.
Yeah, I mean, as we've been saying in pretty much all of our episodes about Discworld books, like that is one of the central like tenets of Discworld, is that belief has power. And it's an idea that Pratchett comes back to in a lot of books, not just Small Gods, although I think Small Gods is really the only other one that has that as like the central idea of the story, but it plays a factor in a whole bunch of his other books.
Well, it's definitely, like you said, I hesitate to say there are rules of Discworld, but it is a fact of nature in Discworld that is how things function. And that's always true. But I think that it's explored really specifically in these two books.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that's like the meat of the plots is designed to sort of examine that and play around with it in a way that like an offhand comment in a witch's book doesn't hit the same level.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not necessarily sure that I like Hogfather more than Small Gods. I mean, Hogfather is definitely a more mature book, I think, not in terms of content specifically, but just it's a more mature Discworld book. Like Pratchett has had more experience writing Discworld. He knows what he's doing a little bit more. He's been a writer for longer. He's worked out some of the kinks in his own writing and beliefs. But I'm also not as much of a Christmas person as you are, which is not to say that I don't like this book. It's an excellent book.
No, but it definitely hits me different because it's something I particularly enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be, right? Like there's a Discworld book for almost everything. And the ones that you particularly enjoy the like basis of, or the what it's playing off of, you're going to just get into more. How could you not?
Yeah, those hit differently.
Yeah. Something that we also see in all Discworld books, but especially in the Hogfather, are all of the fun different dialogue formats that Pratchett uses. This isn't new. Death has always spoken in all caps. The auditors, the antagonists of this novel, also are in Reaper Man, and they speak with no punctuation whatsoever. Their dialogue looks like just prose in the book, which does make it a little weird, but he's making a point.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think I've ever noticed that there were no like punctuation marks in there.
There's no punctuation, and it doesn't even say like they said necessarily at the end of it every time.
Well, no, but you don't necessarily say that at the end of, or authors don't necessarily say that at the end of all conversations or dialogue.
No,
tags.
But they usually have quotation marks. So you
right.
can tell that it's speech.
Right. They do usually have quotation marks. But I will be honest, I did not notice until you said it that they do not have any punctuation.
No, none whatsoever.
Clearly it's more noticeable for some people than others.
And it's also described as, I think the head of the Assassin's Guild is having a conversation with them. And it's described that he's not hearing them speak. He just knows what they said.
Yeah.
And so it's not speech necessarily. So like,
it makes sense that
he's doing it on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Susan gets to use the death voice occasionally, but she does have quotation marks around her all caps. I love that she's like baby death. She can do the caps, but she can't quite get rid of the quotation marks.
It's a nice way to distinguish death from granddaughter death, and to show that even though she is acting as death or having death's powers, she's still got that little bit of innate humanity in her that death is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Hex, who is the thinking machine that the wizards, or more specifically that the postgrads at Unseen University have come up with, who has little plus signs before and after each sentence of his. Its. I mean, he's a computer.
I think Ridcully specifically corrects himself because he keeps calling it a he. And it's like, wait, no, it's an it.
Yeah, Ridcully does. I really enjoy Hex.
Oh, me too. And there's a mouse on a wheel, and no one knows why Hex asked for a little mouse to be part of it, but he did, and it doesn't work if the mouse is like not happy or something. It's delightful nonsense, and it's basically how I imagine computers work in real life.
I mean, I wish that when they talk about RAM, they were actually talking about RAM skulls as they are with Hex.
And Hex's dialogue, of course, is also not spoken. It's like printed out on little strips of paper.
Yeah. I particularly like the way that the Ponder Stibbons and his crew of, as I said, essentially postgrads, the way that they talk about some of the pieces that make up Hex, because they don't really know what it does, but they give everything acronyms to make it sound better. Like the fluffy teddy bear becomes the FBT, for example.
The GBL. Initiate the GBL.
Yes.
Which is pulling the great big lever.
It just feels like they're working on a computer, which they are. But I, as someone who does software development, I appreciate it.
Didn't Pratchett, what is it? He was involved in some mod for, which game was it? But I think he was writing dialogue. I don't think he was actually coding.
Yeah, he was writing dialogue.
Yeah.
And I forget what game it was, but
I'm going to get the name wrong, so I'm going to look at, I think it was the Scrolls one. Elder Scrolls?
Possibly. I think they
one of the really old ones, though.
Yeah, I think that Rob Wilkins actually talks about it a little bit in the biography that he wrote of Terry Pratchett, Rob Wilkins being his longtime personal assistant. But I don't remember specifically what game it was.
That is Elder Scrolls. Hey!
Proud of you.
I don't play those games. It's not like, that's not my vibe. But I was pretty sure I had gotten that right. I did want to make sure, though. Video game trivia is not something to fuck around with. All right, Sarah, before we get into the spoiler section, normally I would ask, when should you read this book? As in the Discworld series, at what point does it make sense to read this book? Except I'm going to argue that you should just read this book during the holidays. And it doesn't really matter if you've read other Discworld books. You'll understand Death and Susan better if you've read the earlier Death books, but I think you can pick it up. It explains pretty well what you need to know in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could pick it up and understand it. And if you're a slow reader and you really want to read a Christmas-related Discworld book during the holidays, sure, pick it up. If you are starting on December 1st and you're a pretty fast reader, I would argue you should read Reaper Man and Soul Music and then read Hogfather, and you will enjoy Hogfather more. But those are not requirements per se.
No, the basics of this book, the Grim Reaper exists. I feel like that is pretty swallowable for any new reader. And the conversations around the power of belief and the nature of existence are pretty well hammered out in the text. And so like you'll miss out on some of the like Ankh-Morpork things. You won't know who Nobby Nobbs is, but that sure doesn't affect your reading of the book.
Well, if you only read Reaper Man and Soul Music, you might not have a great understanding of Nobby Nobbs anyway.
Yeah, so I don't think this would suffer too much.
I don't think it would suffer too much. I mean, I think it does suffer a little bit from not having read at least Reaper Man and Susan, just because you don't get the introduction to the auditors and you don't get Susan's introduction, so you don't understand their characters as well.
Yeah.
But again, you don't specifically need that. It just helps a little bit.
I would say watching the adaptation without having read the book is kind of a lot. I have introduced many people to the movie The Hogfather and do have to pause every like 20 minutes because they have questions. It's just because it moves really fast.
Yeah.
And doesn't take a lot of time to explain things that if you're reading the book, you would pick up on as a new reader. So as much as I love the adaptation, I think it is complementary to the book more than it is a stand-in. To avoid spoilers, skip to 5320. I have a question for you, and I don't know if the answer is going to be a spoiler or not.
What's your question?
Like, what is up with the auditors, though? Do they ever actually give us a reason why they hate Christmas so much? Or is it just, it doesn't make sense, so we don't like it?
It's not that they hate Christmas in particular, I don't think. It's that humanity is messy and they don't like mess. They want things to be orderly and regular and, line up properly. And humanity as a whole doesn't do that.
Yeah, I just don't see how getting rid of Hogswatch makes humanity more orderly. Like that is a leap of logic that I needed more.
Baby steps. Get rid of Hogswatch, which gets rid of like some human creativity. And then you slowly start getting rid of more and more things until eventually you get rid of humanity as a whole.
See, maybe the problem is that Hogswatch is too close to Christmas. Because, like, I don't think anyone's ever argued that organized religion makes humanity more creative.
Yeah.
So maybe Hogswatch is frivolous and joyous and free.
But also, I think there's that aspect of, and this is something that Death kind of says at the end of the book, where he's saying that the sun won't come up if the Hogfather is gone, because we need that belief. And then it turns out that, yes, a flaming ball of gas would still come up. So I think it has partially to do with getting rid of the
whimsy of belief itself.
The creative things that people do to explain the logic of the universe, and then all that's left is just that cold hard logic.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I mean, okay, so like the importance of the Hogfather is discussed. Like Death explains it to Susan, but like the auditor's actual problem with him, I was just like, okay, I'm on board, but like I don't really get why like what they're accomplishing here. And maybe the problem is because killing the Hogfather did not get rid of all of the belief. It just made more silliness. It created more wackiness.
I mean, it got rid of a lot of belief.
All of the belief was floating around and created things like the Eater of Socks.
I mean, I think the ultimate problem is that the auditors just don't like the Discworld because it's a silly world. Like they want it to be logical and sensible, and it just is not.
Okay. I get that. But I just think that this was a bad plan. Even if that hadn't been stopped by Susan and Death. Like clearly they had a bad strategy.
Which, to be fair, seems to be their MO. I mean, they're
Yeah.
not really known for making good decisions.
Maybe I should just accept that they're bad at what they do.
Yeah. I can see your point about them not being super fleshed out villains. I think this is one of those times where having such a big gap in between like death books or not reading the death books chronologically doesn't help. Not that I think we get a great description of their motivation. I mean, we know their motivations, but like I don't think that they're that much fleshed out, even if you read Reaper Man immediately prior to this. But
well, in Reaper Man, it makes sense because having death on vacation means people aren't dying, and that's making everything goofy and weird. So they're trying to put things back in order.
no, but they retire death.
Oh shit, that's right. Yeah, like they're stupid. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, like I get their motivation, but I agree that their actions are not particularly well thought out. I think in some respects they're plot contrivance.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I don't need to think too hard about them.
No, I like it doesn't ruin the book, obviously. I love it, but Teatime is a much better villain. Holy shit.
Well, and I think that's why he's the focus, like he's the main villain. He's not the one who put out the hit on the Hogfather, but he is the villain of the books in a way that I think that the auditors are not. He's the focal villain.
Oh, 100%. He's also pretty maybe he when I said atmospheric earlier to describe the difference between the book and the adaptation, maybe I really just meant Teatame. Because in the book, he is terrifying, but because he's capable of great violence, but also like a very light and polite, like lighthearted, polite young man, and it's that sort of contrast that makes him extra spooky. But in the movie, he's very intense. And it works in the movie, but I do think that's maybe one of the biggest differences, is just his like vibe.
I do not remember his vibe in the movie at all.
Well, when we rewatch it, I'll make you tweet that you agree with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how everyone will know that I'm being held hostage.
There's a lot of really elegant foreshadowing in this book.
Yeah, I really enjoyed like those little hints, picking up on things like his mention about teeth and how if you have a little bit of a person like teeth or toenail clippings or whatever, you can control them. And it's just a throwaway line that you don't realize until you get to the end of the book that it was quite important.
The one that I wrote down is when the head of the Assassin's Guild is amazed that Teatame had already like strategized a way to murder the Hogfather, just like as a thought exercise. And Teatame says, yeah, I've thought about all sorts of people, the Hogfather, the Soul Cake Duck, death, and then that sure does come back. I think it particularly the way he slips it in to a conversation that makes it feel so like good when you get to that on a reread.
I guess. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have considered that foreshadowing specifically because, yeah, he does essentially try to kill Death. I mean, there's no essentially about it. He tries to kill Death, but it wasn't like that was a crime of opportunity more than a thought out. He was following his plan to kill Death.
I don't know about that. I think he only recognized the opportunity because he had thought about it.
That's possible. I guess I just found that a little more ancillary to like the plot than some of his other foreshadowing. I guess that doesn't make it any less foreshadowing.
Yeah. It's not like a huge plot point. That's not like a big reveal. It's just, hey, that's coming. I feel like in some of the earlier Night Watch books, or the Watch books.
City Watch, I think.
City Watch, whatever they're called. The Vimes, Sam Vimes books. There's been some foreshadowing that's like, gee, wouldn't it be crazy if this thing happened? And then, yeah, that thing happens later in the book. Not that bad, but it stood out more, even like not remembering where the book goes. You're giving me a hint about something. Okay.
The foreshadowing in this book is quite subtle, which is nice. I agree.
Yeah. And so it works really well, and it's not hitting you over the head with it. It's something to pick up on a reread, not trying to clue us in on something the first time.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things, not foreshadowing, is Death being a complete sweetheart while he is the Hogfather, but because he's optimistically, like he's an optimist at heart, and he's coming up against the harsh realities that are, you know, social economic injustices, and he wants to give everyone nice things for Hogswatch, and Alfred's like, you can't do that. That's not how the world works. And Death thinking, but that's how the world should work.
Yeah.
Albert, not Alfred. Yeah, he's really sweet in this book, and I really like it.
He really embodies the be the change you want to see in the world.
Yes.
Quote. It's nice. He sees something wrong, and so he does something about it. Now, granted, we don't all have superpowers the way Death does, but the scene where he brings the little girl back to life.
Where he refuses to kill her. I don't know if she's actually dead so much as dying.
He gives her an extension on life.
Yeah.
Whatever that order of operations is. That scene always gets me. It was very sad.
Yeah. Albert's comment about, well, you have to have little match girls freezing to death so that other people can feel better about their lives is just so depressing.
Yeah. Well, and then you get the scene later when he interrupts a king trying to give charity to some random person who needs it. And Death is like, you're just doing this to feel better about yourself. You're not actually going to make like a lasting change in this person's life.
Which is kind of funny, because not that is why Death is doing nice things for people, but in a very real sense, I think that is what the consequences are the same. Like, Death is giving people these nice things for Hogswatch, or wants to give people these nice things for Hogswatch, but he's not going to he can't make a lasting impact on their lives because it's not reoccurring.
But he would if he could.
He would if he could. I mean, the intention is there, but I do think it's kind of ironic that he is lambasting the king for having bad intentions in his gift giving, when the end result is essentially the same thing as what he's doing.
I think it's really interesting. What if he is so upset because this king has the opportunity to do what Death wishes he could, and so he's mad that this person is not doing it?
I mean, you're probably right that is part of why he's mad about it.
Yeah, like he's frustrated. Like, isn't it funny if this amazing anthropomorphic personification of the concept of death had the ability that this random mortal had, he could do more. I mean, I guess a king is not a random mortal, but he's like running into his limitations and seeing this opportunity get squandered by this jerk.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's a sad book. It's a happy book. It's a good book. It makes you feel things.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, as expected from Pratchet, there is a lot of commentary, social commentary. And not all of that is happy. A lot of it is very unhappy, in fact.
Yeah. Except for just the very idea that death loves humanity so much. And another character who we see at the end of this book, the Tooth Fairy, who is actually the Tooth Fairy, the head Tooth Fairy, who is actually the original boogeyman, who fell in love with children and like humanity so much that the boogeyman turned into the Tooth Fairy to protect kids and adults and anybody from being controlled by their teeth, right? Because that's the point of this book. Teatime is using teeth to control people because the Tooth Fairy has them all stashed away. But we're seeing these two basically omniscient supernatural forces who see the best and the worst of humanity. And they're saying, like, yes, ultimately, these strange little creatures are good and they're worth fighting for. And that's very sweet.
It is very sweet. I mean, but you also get the impression that Pratchett's a realist because he has plenty of characters, specifically Albert, I'm thinking about, who have a lot of comments about like the realities of humanity and like, yeah, you can want to be good, but people aren't always good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The fact that the Tooth Fairy needs to guard all of these teeth means she's guarding the teeth from other humans. Like, I think that's part of what makes it so sweet is that you know these beings have seen everything that people do to each other. And I think therefore it's implied that all of the good things that people do outweighs all of the bad things people do.
Okay, semi-related, not necessarily an answer to your statement, but why wouldn't the Tooth Fairy like crush the teeth or get rid of them, like do something to ensure that they no longer existed so that they could no longer be used to control people instead of hoard them in a tower where bad people could get into them and then use them to control the world, the Discworld's population?
That's a great question. I mean, grinding them up, they would still be teeth. There would just be a lot of pieces of them now.
Yeah, but I mean, like, how intact do they need to be in order to be used? Like, if you ground them down to a very fine powder, would you need to have all of the powder? Would having just a little bit suffice?
Well, you only need one tooth. So,
yeah, but how much of one tooth do you need?
I mean,
how I guess, like, do you need a whole tooth?
That feels like a question for a wizard, which unfortunately I'm not qualified to answer.
I'm just really curious about the logistics, and like, surely there was a better response than just keeping them all in a tower.
And you can burn teeth, right? Like they get reduced to ash for like cremains and stuff.
I thought teeth were one of the things that remained.
Oh, really?
I don't take me up on that without looking it up. I could be wrong.
Oh, well, she could have kept them in glasses of Diet Coke and they would just melt over time. That's a thing, right? Is that a thing people still do?
I'm gonna look up, do teeth burn?
Well, we know that acid will melt them, so she could have just had like a vat of acid or maybe a lava. Maybe her lair should have been in a volcano.
Yeah, okay. So teeth are considered to be the most indestructible components of the human body, and they do have a high resistance to things like fire and decomposition.
Someone tell that to my dentist.
I think maybe that's after people are dead.
Now, how is that fair?
It's not fair, not at all. So, but maybe like, Tooth Fairy fires would be hotter than regular fires. I don't know. It still feels to me, and you definitely, I know for a fact you can like take a Dremel and file them down.
Ooh, please don't ever say filing teeth to me ever.
I mean, I'm not talking about how you should do this while your teeth are still in your mouth.
You were causing me physical pain, Sarah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop now.
Thank you,
Bone Room.
I mean, I know you can, but ow.
Well, you wouldn't do it while the teeth were still in your mouth.
Yeah, but that's what my brain imagines when you say stuff like that.
Anyway, okay, there are a lot of very good quotes in this book. I think that the most well-known quote from this book is on page 336, Death and Susan talking. And Susan says, all right, I'm not stupid. You're saying humans need fantasies to make life bearable. Really? As if it was some kind of pink pill? No. Humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape. Tooth fairies? Hogfathers? Little? Yes. As practice, you have to start out learning to believe the little lies, so we can believe the big ones? Yes. Justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing.
I just had a brain blast. There's an earlier conversation Death has with Albert, where Albert is getting concerned that Death is way too into this Hogfather thing. And there's this whole conversation they have where Death is like, I know, it's my duty. I've always been all about duty, because it's his duty to be the Grim Reaper and do the whole death thing. Oh, but then if you connect that to this quote at the end where he says duty is, a made up concept, whatever, it's not real, it's a human thing. Either, no, I just had this thought, so I don't have it well mapped out yet. I could see it going two ways. Either that is a little bit of his humanity, right? If believing in duty is what makes us human, then doesn't that make Death a little bit human too? Or he loves humans so much that he is playing by their rules just for their sake.
I'm inclined to believe that it's showing a little bit of his humanity, or at least that's Pratchett's intention. I feel like the whole point of why the auditors are against Death so much is because he has evolved, and he has gone beyond his original concept of just being, this anthropomorphic personification. And he does have that little smidgen of humanity to him. And I think that conversation that he has with Albert and this later conversation that he has with Susan kind of represents that.
I would argue by the Hogfather, it's maybe more than a smidgen. His relationship with Susan is clearly much better by the end of the book. And the way he manipulates her is very human.
It's quite good, yes.
The flawless reverse psychology of, oh no, you shouldn't get involved. It was so good.
Yes, I guess. I mean, you're right. It's more than a smidgen. It grows in every book. I still don't think he understands humanity very well at times.
Well, yes, I agree with you there.
Yes, and he has a tendency to take everything literally, but he definitely has some humanity to him. We've rubbed off on him like a bad stain.
Oh, he likes it. So I was typing out my notes for this episode, and Sarah told me I spelled boogeyman wrong.
I specifically said you spelled it inaccurately to the book, not that you spelled it wrong.
Maybe you followed up with that later when I started Googling to find out if I was right or not.
No, I said you spelled it wrong. The book only uses one O.
Okay.
And because of how close the sentences were, like there was no gap in between me saying them.
Okay.
It was one solid thought.
All right. You're excused then. It's still a funny word, though. Boogeymen come up a lot in this book. Susan is a governess of two young children who are pants-shittingly terrified of monsters under their bed or hiding in their closet, in the basement, monster places.
Thanks to their prior governess, who was a horrible human being.
Yes. And Susan knows that they exist because she's involved in the supernatural world. And so she beats them up with pokers or threatens them with cute fluffy things and kicks them out of the house. And it's very fun. I love that concept. But the word boogeyman is weird. Is it related to the dance at all?
I don't know.
Or the word booger?
I don't know that either.
I bet it is related to the word booger because the British say bogey and bogeyman, right?
I do think they say, yeah.
And that's too similar. Our booger's good for you. Why is that the autofill?
You didn't want to talk about teeth. I don't want to talk about boogers and snot. I'm still ill and blowing my nose a lot more than I would like to be.
The internet's not helping. Anyway, but I was looking up boogeyman versus bogeyman. Apparently they are from the same root word. It might have something to do with the devil, so that's less fun.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Merriam-Webster definition of booger, which does say that it's an alteration of boggart. Does link to bogeyman and bugbear, which is apparently a terrifying or dreaded person or thing, not the creature that I associate from D&D.
The Wikipedia article I was in did say that bugbears and goblins have been related in the past, so that's not... D&D didn't totally make that up.
Yeah, I mean, the definition, the first definition of bugbear in Merriam-Webster is an imaginary goblin or specter used to excite fear.
And they sure do that when you're level 3.
Yes.
Well, there sure are a lot of different versions of this word. Like, holy shit. I was just trying to prove that I could put in as many O's as I wanted to. But it turns out I could kind of just start slapping letters down and I probably wouldn't be wrong.
English is a funny old language, that's for sure.
And everyone has a version of shit that scares you.
And yet they're all some variation of bogeyman.
The dance word boogie is not related. At all. It's possibly from the West African word boogie, meaning to dance.
So yes, quite different.
Entirely.
A false cognate.
Now, we did have an honorable mention for our Words Are Weird this evening.
Yes, if we had not had, or if you had not had something that was slightly more relevant to the book, I was going to propose shag, as in a blue-eyed shag, as in a type of cormorant, which is a kind of bird. Blue-eyed shags are found in Antarctica. I saw a lot of them. And when someone told me we were going through the Drake Passage and passing there was some kind of little like rocky outcropping that was covered in birds. And someone said, oh, those are shags. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting choice of word for a bird.
Bird scientists must have a sense of humor, because I remember in 9th grade biology, everyone loving the section on blue-footed boobies.
Yes.
Yeah. Aren't there also tits?
There are tits, yes.
Yeah, I feel like birds have the overwhelming, like, sex word names.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't know how it came about. Well, obviously, scientists have a sense of humor, but...
Bird scientists in particular, though, I'm calling you out.
Birders are just unexpectedly horny.
It's all the feathers.
Anyway, you did have a better Words Are Weird, but that was my honorable mention.
I did think we should still bring it up, though, because I do enjoy giggling. Even when I am fully aware that this is obviously a completely different word in context.
Yes.
It's still fun laughing at it.
It is still fun laughing at it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram and other social media platforms at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And go ahead and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and some other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.